paperbacks. That's probably my favorite part of it. So apparently, I might have just gotten it streaming. I'm hoping. I'm hoping. Anyway, there's a few extra steps. Honestly, I don't understand why various companies do the things that they do. For the
That's
simple reason
probably my
that,
favorite part of it.
oh my goodness. So I've
Apparently, I
fallen
might have
into the
just gotten it streaming.
classic blunder.
I'm hoping.
I'm hoping. Anyway,
Got involved in a land war in Asia.
uh, well, sorry, my bad. The third classic blunder, which is fourth, which is that you have the ability to, uh, you start hearing yourself over your stream. What I'm going to have to do is just take this down and put up the recording later. That's all right though. Anyway, best to have it working in some form or other. Someday, I feel that companies will stop messing around with their products and actually create something that works. But unfortunately, that's a little too logical for them right now. Ah, well. Logical like the socks, am I right?
Like a sock.
Yeah, oh, like a sock. Though I've been really impressed with a lot of the villains you've been putting out with, as well as the heroes. Like a lot of your main characters, have that spark of being both familiar and fairly unique. I was watching. Oh, what was I watching? I was watching some sort of anime review or something like that, and I thought to myself, wait a minute. It's like that's basically Maritza. That's basically, this, that, and the other. And it wasn't just like one Gundam anime. It was just a whole bunch of them. And it's like you have these archetypes that come down. But unlike this Gundam anime, which was, quite frankly, even though I dearly appreciate the sci-fi and mecha genres and stuff like that, my consumption of them is actually quite low compared to some people. How do you keep it fresh while also maintaining that sort of familiar feeling?
Well, one thing I will agree with is that Maritza is pretty basic. All right. No, I love her. I have a deep appreciation for all my characters, but they do occupy, let's say, a spectrum of depth and character background. But one thing I do like to do is take kind of the everyman, or perhaps even kind of an out of touch or sheltered, privileged character, and then run a character through the ringer, get that character mugged by reality.
Ooh.
So we are definitely going to see Mitzi have an arc in CY40 Second Coming, especially after the bombshell revelation about her family she learned at the end of Cold Junior 40, which I won't spoil, but you know what I'm talking about.
I do. I absolutely do. It was quite the spoiler indeed. And we got Wooly Ram joining us. Hello, Wooly Ram.
Hello.
So I noticed that with how do I want to put it? Let's sort of go over with the characters, and not like where they are spoiler wise, uh, but you have a certain level of, I don't want to say synchronicity with the first book and the second book, but people are in similar positions at the end of the first book as they are in the second book, and vice versa. So with Arthur Wake, where did you get the idea for his character, and how did he evolve in your mind?
That is honestly the toughest question for me to answer. Right. I mean, the archetypal question authors is, where do you get your ideas? And like, well, where don't you? They're everywhere. The execution is really the issue. But I'm not going to cop out on this. I'll just, because I've been with Arthur and Tom so long, they've just been
Mm-hmm.
stewing in the back of my brain. It's like trying to remember when you first met like a grade school friend, right?
Mm.
Like, what was the first thing you did? Oh, we met at Baskin Robbins. But
Well,
I
it's I
recall. Go ahead.
well, it's like when I sort of go over characters, oftentimes they're not so much characters as bundles of tropes I start to sew together. I'm suppose I'm asking, are you a hatch stitch or a cross stitch kind of guy? When you what purposes did you envision for Tom when you said I need something like this?
Okay. Yeah, so it's going. That's not quite how the character generation process went.
Ah,
And it can be either or. Sometimes I'll be I'll be writing, I'll be outlining, think, okay, I need a purpose built character to do job X and get the plot to the point it needs to be at to be a foil. Sometimes the characters just spring fully formed from my forehead like Athena. They just
without
walk
the
up and
headache
introduce
though.
them. Yeah, yeah, all the time especially. But they just walk up and introduce themselves like Astlin from Soul Cycle happened like that. I don't know where she came from. Just one day she popped into my head.
Which one's Ashley?
Seriously. Astlin the Fire Soul Dancer.
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
remember her now.
Yeah.
She was the one that was half brass, wasn't she?
More than half.
More than half. Yeah, that's true. I did like
Yeah.
that bit actually. It's quite excellent.
Thanks.
But back to CY40, which is what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So when you uh, Tom and or Arthur and what was his pet mathematician's name?
Morley.
Morley have a great dynamic. How did you work that out inside your head in your processes, so on and so forth?
Okay. Well, with Arthur, he's a really complex character inside a complex origin.
Mm-hmm.
So the basic idea of just this guy who embodies a duality, but both of which sides agree, or they share the trait of having no empathy whatsoever. They're just utterly ruthless, right?
Mm-hmm.
That just kind of occurred to me, and I'm sure it's a confluence of multiple references and influences,
Of course.
but he's really the impetus of the whole Xseed story. Like even
Yes.
before I wrote the first book, there was Arthur. I also had some help from some other friends. One friend in particular, because I like to game out my outlines or even just run them past people. So he's also some of the finer points are a result of brainstorming with my buddy. Like he helped come up with Arthur's brutal tutelage under Captain Spencer Sheridan, as we see in the prologue. And then it
Mm-hmm.
just started snowballing. Just started asking myself, okay, what would this guy do based on his background? What's his path to where he's at like? Okay, and at some point along the path, I decided that he had to come across someone like Morley. Now, she is more one of those characters where I thought, okay, I have a purpose, I have a need to fill, and so I engineered her to fill that niche
I get you.
because,
Which is more about what I
yeah,
was asking for Tom earlier. Really, I should have been asking that about Morley.
right. That's a good insight. Yeah, exactly. I suppose I should have said that. So she is his foil, and the
Literary.
more yeah, she's more
Sorry.
of the logical side. She's sort of the sober yin to his raging yang, I suppose,
Mm-hmm.
where he more follows his passions. Although he is cold and calculating, he is mainly emotionally motivated.
Mm-hmm.
He just hungers and thirsts for vindication, for the desire to get revenge, specifically by hurting the people who hurt him.
Right. And that's even by proxy, since it's through Spencer that he learns everything that makes him him.
Indeed.
Yeah. Well, I always thought he was pretty good um, as a character, especially when you compare him to like Faust and Ivan and others who have
Hmm.
like more direct stakes with the plot, with the history, with Werbund Bavaria and so on and so forth. And then there's Tom. It's like, where were you? Well, I was in, I don't know, the Rocky Mountains,
Hmm.
and some dude told me kill a sock or kill this puppy. One of those two things are going to happen. And I chose to kill the sock for the puppy. And it's like, so, yeah, my country was nuked nearly to extinction, and so on and so forth. And yet, these people are far more reasonable and logical in some ways than he is.
Right. And that comes out of the diversity of backgrounds that all the Halo members have, which was by design because
Hmm.
it's not a huge spoiler. It's set up in the CY2 guide and short story that this is really the events of the second book are really all the machinations of Tesla Browning and his working group working on Project S, which he inherited from Megami and
Hmm.
repurposed to save mankind instead of destroy it. And what Browning found in Project S was Sanzen's recipes for making Megamis.
Yeah.
And so he just decided to go spaghetti and try all of them. And Arthur just worked out the best. In fact,
Yeah.
Arthur, in many ways, is a superior product of Project S to Elizabeth Friedlander. So Browning actually one upped Sanzen with him,
Hmm.
which we're going to see more of in the third book.
I really can't wait for that. Especially since Sanzen, like, this is from the first book. At this point, I do expect you to have at least read all the first book. Um, like, as bad as that might sound. Uh,
I don't think it's unreasonable.
yeah, it's like Christopher Cortum says, well, knowing Brian, he would have an interesting spin on it at least. Indeed. Is
Ah,
that I always have wanted more out of Sanzen. He has an excellent voice, even though he's kind of not quite a cardboard cutout. He has this presence that's like, this guy could be the main villain until, of course, he's devoured by Megami. I guess that's a good way to put it. And
mm,
her psychotic bodyguard Maz. How do you pronounce that name? Maz?
yeah,
Maz? Anyway,
Maz.
Maz, who I also enjoyed. Even if I felt that, I did love the Dolph. So far, your Dolphs are my favorite of the mechs so far.
Yeah, a lot of
But
love for the Dolphs, and
yeah,
quite gratified by that.
but it's like I'm hoping that we see more out of him and more out of what he wanted to do with, um, what his plan was, because Sanzen was moving everything together towards a certain plan, towards his own power, towards a goal. And you mentioned in the other stream by Daddy Warpig that what he found on Mars will be revealed and so on and so forth, which I am definitely looking forward to.
Good, yeah, and I'm going to answer it. Uh, I already have written a major scene that comes right up to the point of just coming out and saying what the Sentinel is, and
Yeah, baby.
I'm I'm going to write a scene where Solia's end in conversation with Arthur just laser cards on the table because the situation is that dire.
Was that
At the same
Browning?
time,
Yes.
yeah,
Sorry.
at the
Go.
same time, well, she's a current Sentinel, but at the same time, like I was alluding to earlier, she looks at what Arthur does in his third book and just says, "Damn, like that was a bit much even for me, dude." Okay,
let's back this out a bit. You're here.
sure.
You're at 10. You need to bring it down to like a 6. A
Pump the brakes,
nice.
kid. Yeah.
It's like which I do like it in its own concept because Arthur has always been. not mysterious, but he's always been driven. And you start to see where he comes out and what he's willing to do throughout all of book two, where he's introduced and where you're sitting there. It's like what's Arthur gonna do next? And all of a sudden, Tom comes out and he starts making jokes about crucifying students who tried to kill Simon and stuff like that. And it's like, whoa, buddy. Uh, whew. I like it. I like it a lot. I do wish we could have seen more of Tom a bit, but Arthur has such a presence that he's really not missed.
Yeah, he's the psycho intellectual axis around which the entire series revolves, to get a bit snobbish for you. But all of Comet Frame XSeed really is Arthur's story.
Right.
And he's not in the first book, but I like to think that his incipient presence haunts it. Like he's kind of there in the background waiting to take the stage.
Mm-hmm.
And if you reread, I'd be interested to hear what a reader would think of reading Collision Year 40, going back and rereading the first book through that lens.
Through the lens of staring at it through Arthur.
Right. And knowing that this is pretty much setting the stage for him.
I gotcha. You see, it's that, and there's also like the Megami thing, because to me, it's mostly there's the other characters and whatnot, but it's also Megami's story, and the story of the
Oh,
Sox
definitely.
versus Earth. So it's like Arthur. Like I'll have to read the third book. Once I read the third book, I'll give you a proper judgment. And I'm starting to write up more videos and reviews and stuff like that, so I'm getting back on that horse. But
Oh, good.
I am I'm curious to see how you put it out, just because we're talking about characters, we're talking about people who drive the plot. These aren't like people who are like, oh, this thing happened and now I must do this. This is yes, this thing happened, I must do this. But I'm also bombarding one of their colony ships in Lagrange 3.
Hmm.
Um, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That will really that will really sort of create this next dynamic with it, especially since these people are in space. They think like spacers and they do act as if people are in space, like as in that mindset that you can't
Hmm.
really fake. Like we can experiment with it, but when you're dealing with an environment that's always 3D, and anything can come at you anywhere, I
Hmm.
assume that the sock mindset was bred by necessity,
Yes.
more than uh, just sort of arose mysteriously.
Right. And in many cases, forcibly, when they were big into genetic engineering and cloning and tinkering.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you're right on the money there. William in the chat says colony ships are a legitimate military target. Amen. Arthur, you and Arthur are fully agreed on all points, sir.
absolutely. But in space,
Yeah.
like everything is a legitimate military target. Like everything can be legitimately used as a weapon some way somehow.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
I was listening to a review by Seth Zintek about a game called Star Sector,
Mm-hmm.
where like there's these space jihadis and they of the Luddite religion of peace that basically create ramming ships full of they have all the guns and stuff on them, but they're also chock full of fuel, and they're barreling at you at 1,000 kilometers a second, which is absolutely terrifying. It's just a fuel ship. Even without the weapons, it's still quite terrifying to see such a thing just start coming in for the ramming maneuver.
Mm.
And of course, with colony ships, who knows what's hidden on them? Like if you're going for that 1,000-year voyage, you can attach, a gun every square inch if you don't mind a real tiny one. Um, on every square inch of the surface. It's not like it'll create drag. It's not like it'll create any problems. As long as your reactors are up to the task, have as many laser pointers as you want.
Exactly.
Also, Alderaan was also a military target.
Ooh, bold, sir.
Bold indeed.
Bold.
You see, if you consider them as the money center of the rebellion, as in, attacking a
Oh.
bank that is funding the rebels, it is no different. Do I think Tarkin was heavy-handed? Of course, of course.
Hmm.
Uh, but they could have just invaded it and started backhanding everyone, and they would have fell in line. Uh, but it was a legitimate military target.
Well, were there any other Exceed characters that you wanted me to touch on, or
Oh,
would
I
you like me
was
to go into more depth on Arthur and Morley?
Oh no, I was just kind of like moving my way through it. So we've talked about Arthur and Morley. I guess now we'll talk about Simon, who's kind
Ah,
of a nerdy guy who's dragged into this. He has an pet AI. Now, I've just realized this as we're talking, but I've noticed that you don't give your AIs personality in this book. Is there a reason for that?
yeah, because those are soft AI.
Mm,
It's to distinguish them. I guess I wanted to be very careful to distinguish the operating systems in the 4.1 series Exceeds in CY40 from Prometheus
mm-hmm.
in the previous book, and to some degree Maryland.
Yes.
Um, and the AIs in the 4 Exceeds and CY40 are a direct. They are the way they are as a direct response to
Mm-hmm.
Prometheus and Maryland, and it's because in the first book, Max Darving and Tessel Browning basically ended up stumbling upon hard AI or true AI by accident.
Mm,
And there are elements I don't want to spoil here,
mm-hmm.
but remember who it was. Remember that Prometheus was originally intended by Begami to be the demon in the bottle that would help her destroy mankind.
Right.
But Prometheus voluntarily turned from that path, as was his prerogative, because someone talked him out of it.
In the nanosecond that they could talk about it.
It was Marilyn.
Yep.
What
I
had Marilyn been doing throughout the book? What was her little hobby?
Staring out into the star systems.
And not just staring, but listening.
Yes.
She was doing SETI at home, right?
Yep.
So you have to ask at what point did Prometheus become truly self-aware? When did he wake up? Well, that's kind of an open question, but Faust and Simon state outright in Coltrane 40 that, yeah, in 40 years, no one has managed to replicate Max's feat in creating a strong AI.
Yep. I
So
do
Prometheus
remember
was
that.
Prometheus was the only one. So the AIs in the 4X seed. So I mean, their names are Ezekiel, Emancipator, Eisenford, and Eschaton. Those are the names of the AIs because as the different pilots used them in the different machines, their algorithmic learning led them to uh, bifurcate into different personalities. But they're Chinese rooms. They're not truly self-aware,
Mm.
and they they can communicate. They can think to some degree, but they're kind of like R2D2. They don't have voice boxes. They communicate with the pilots really only through information on their monitors
Right.
or Simon's phone. So the
Then more.
reader, I didn't give the reader a direct look at what they're saying again because I didn't want to sow confusion, and I wanted to have that hard delineation between them and Prometheus.
Mm. I get you. I will say that I did appreciate that disconnect from Maryland. Like
Hmm.
There's nothing more unpleasant than having some annoying character bounce around who you don't like and don't need. But at the same time, I did notice it. I did think that was quite interesting. The disconnect between Marilyn and Prometheus and so on and so forth, with Ezekiel Eisenford and so on and so forth,
Hmm.
that they seem truncated compared to their mother and father, so to say. Though I did find that
Hmm.
like Red's tiny AI versus Simon's Ezekiel was like, oh, you just always over, you overwhelm this, the sock stuff, but compared to Ezekiel, oh, you got nothing, kid.
Yeah, well, because consider the source. I mean, everybody's software is coming from BEC, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was part of Browning's policy of carefully releasing technological upgrades in metered doses. So he set up the board beforehand to his advantage because who's building the SOX mobile suits or Comet frames? Browning.
Browning. It's just everything's Browning.
Yeah, who's building the XSeeds to take on the coalition? Browning. So yeah, his software team is releasing these security updates to the coalition through his contractors, but then he's reserving the good stuff for Halo, and he's reserving
Mm-hmm.
the best stuff for the XSeed pilots. And that's why Simon's test, because again, he's the one that the whole business rests on, right? He's Charlie
Mm-hmm.
Bucket looking for the golden ticket. That golden ticket is, can you, Simon, engineer an AI that can beat Halos even, that can take
Yeah.
on the best stuff? And to do that, you're going to actually need to write a bit of Prometheus into your existing next generation OS. And he managed to figure a way to do that. So
Mm-hmm.
Simon is actually the creator of these war machines in a way, because without him, they he ensouled them basically.
Mm. I getcha. So it's
Yeah.
it's it's it just keeps coming back to Browning. Let's see here. Uh, is AI self-awareness something that can be manufactured, or is it emergent?
We're talking about in the context of the book.
Mm-hmm. That's a question from Wooly Ram.
Okay. Well, in the context of the book, I don't want to I don't want to spoil anything. But I would say that in keeping with the book's underlying cosmology, nothing is just emergent.
Right.
Emergent is just another way of saying I don't know. Because well, I
Right.
mean, it denies causation.
Mm-hmm.
So, or rather, it denies final causation, right? In teleology.
Right.
So, no, it's on purpose and toward a purpose. I'll just say that.
Right. Of course. I've always found that like emergent AI only works if people are already working on AI and something beyond them causes the pieces to come together correctly. Um, but then again, it's still, you still have that causation problem. Like, what if you take a piece of AI and then slot it into a different computer? Does it arise and multiply by itself, or does it, or is it just a piece of dead hardware with some weird code on it? Um, which,
Yeah,
of
I mean,
course, is itself 100 different sci-fi novels, I'm sure.
yeah, like the I've always found the explanation. Well, the conditions were right, so it happened to be a dodge. Because okay, well, how did the
Yes.
conditions get there? Well, randomly. Well, randomness doesn't cause anything.
Yep.
Randomness is just statistics speak for we don't know,
Yeah.
or that the cause is too complex.
Or it's
So,
it's it's more like people who deny any potential sort of ramifications for other people's actions on their own life. Nobody likes to hear that, well, like it's like the free will question. Nobody likes to hear that a lot of
yeah.
their actions were determined by other people. But at the same time, it's like you still chose, dude. You still chose to do this and that, or go out to eat with some friends, as I'm doing after this, or whatever have you. Whatever they do. Um, it's
Oh, yeah.
ultimately you still decided to follow along.
Yeah.
Or with when it comes to like sci-fi things, oh, it how did these aliens arise? Oh, it just happened. They look to the reader, wink, and then turn back to deal with whatever they're doing. And it's like,
Yeah,
it's like, put the book down. It's like, I don't care what you have to say anymore. I don't care how good your writing is. You know, well, but that's its own
yeah,
thing.
definitely an eye roll moment. So
Yeah.
yeah, well, it was a pulp archivist who pointed out that first of all, he called Simon one of the two most sympathetic characters in the book,
Yeah.
in contrast to Malov, and said that his struggle is how to remain good in evil times. I know that second there completely nailed it. That Simon was another purpose-built character, and that is his purpose.
Mm, I get you.
He's another
And
everyman mugged by reality.
yeah. And then I guess
Yeah,
Malov is something about loyalty to evil men, I guess, or women as this case may be. But ultimately
right.
being against the terrorist organization who is murdering people, uh, which is its own thing, I guess.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, Malov is the Shar.
yeah, and I'm looking forward to him coming back in the next, Combat XSeed book. I hope, and I wouldn't mind some more things from him. Though I find it interesting that he's a custom inspector. I understand that you can have corruption in the socks and stuff like that, but the idea that he's a customs inspector in space, I would assume that that's in a strangely unified society like the socks, um, that would be more about killing rats than dealing with smugglers. What would they smuggle? Drugs?
Well, in a way, it is because in the conversation between him and his superiors, it comes out that look, whatever it says on paper, what the Coalition Secretariat sees the Customs Bureau's job as is quarantining the Earth and keeping their backwards stupidity from infecting space. So he's basically a glorified prison warden set over a planet-sized, insane asylum, mental
Yes.
hospital. Yeah, as far as the Sox see it. So he sees his job, his duty, as different than what his superiors do because he's literal minded to a fault.
Hmm.
And his conflict comes from being unable to reconcile the letter of the law with the spirit when everyone above him is insisting on the latter.
Right. And of course, he falls on the spirit of the law, doesn't he?
Well, he more falls on the letter.
Really? Because it seems to me more that his superiors follow the letter of the law, on the letter of keeping the laws and their power intact, but he works towards the spirit of sock society, and so on and so forth, with his nonlinear thinking and his sort of drive to put down Halo, where other people just kind of dismiss them while they slowly gain power and resources.
Well, you know what? I've one great piece of advice I got is never to argue with the reader over an interpretation of a book. So uh, I'm going to say you're not wrong, but let's look at it from another point of view. Okay. Yes,
Hmm.
your summation is exactly right, but who's enforcing the law and who's not? I mean, Halo, like you said, they are committing murders. They're committing a number of crimes, and it's Malov's superiors are saying, "Oh, this isn't really happening." They're just coming with any rationalization to sweep it under the rug and just
Ah,
ostrich and hope everything turns out okay in the morning.
so do you say
Whereas
that's the letter or the spirit of the law then?
I would say that's a letter because what Halo's doing is illegal. Like from his
Hmm,
mindset, like what they're doing is illegal. Therefore, they incur these penalties, which I must exact.
I get you. Yeah, I can't
Yeah.
really disagree with that. to me, like what you described, how his superiors are acting, are to me the letter of the law. Like they are like, well,
Mhm.
they're not doing anything this second, so I guess we won't do
Ah,
anything. But Malov's
okay.
like, no, no, we must get them before they do something again. Which to me is a spirit thing. Looking
Okay.
to the future rather than looking at the now, which is what the socks kind of do a lot of the time.
Mhm.
Though sadly, we haven't seen as many socks as I'd like to see from
Hmm.
different backgrounds because we've only seen government bureaucrats so far and a psychotic bodyguard. Um,
Well, the
um,
Kazoku don't really count, but
yes.
there was something else. But yeah, we will see more everyday socks. I've got a character who's seen I've already written in CY40 Second Coming, who's just like
Hmm.
a shift supervisor in the maintenance department of a colony, and we get in his head, yeah, and
I
deal with
get
what
it.
he's dealing with. But make it interesting. It's not just one of these dreary slice of life day at the office kind of things. Just, no, stuff blows up in his scene. But
Right. It's
yeah, I try to
like,
give.
eh,
Go ahead.
well, it's like it's like, hey, so what do you do? Well, here's 3 pages of him drinking coffee. Uh, okay.
No, we
All
deal with
right.
stuff like how. Well, speaking of drinking coffee, his coworkers gave him an ironic "World's Greatest Dad" mug because he specifically can't. Like, basically, I borrowed the Chinese social credit system and kind of copied it and pasted it to the space colonies.
Hmm.
So he is, in terms of monetary credit score and social credit score, he doesn't meet the qualifications to get married when he really wants to. He
Yeah.
wants to be a husband and father, and he can't yet. So he's working the plan. He's like, okay, if I work this much overtime for this many months, I can save up for this, and then I can
Hmm.
do that. And he's got like you picture a wall calendar next to him with all kinds of marks on it because he's a working stiff who's trying to achieve what used to come naturally and easily in the past, but that the managerial nanny state has just butted into and complicated.
Right. It's like,
Yeah, so
listen,
that's his conflict.
I just want to go to a dance class and meet some girls or something. It's like, no, 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 friend. Listen, the party has some concerns. We're pretty sure that you had 5 seconds of bad thought. Earlier this year. So you're gonna have to work a lot of overtime before it's logical and reasonable for you to, meet some
Exactly.
chick. And then I had a short story, and it was like Soviets fighting
Hmm.
over a planet, and like part of the thing was, like all the fight scenes, the guy takes a battle drug, and so it gets real weird. And then he comes
Hmm.
out of it, and he's the last man standing in whatever he was fighting. He makes it back. He kills a superior that was going to turn traitor, and it's like, congratulations, comrade. You get a level 2 wife, and you'll be get this plush guard thing as a hero of the Soviet something or other planet. And he just thinks to himself, tier 2, what does that mean? Oh, not diseased and can still bear children. But don't expect anything else. It's like I always I'm just waiting for that to happen. Or like we'll hear about China in uh what's the term I want? Importing a large amount of Laotian
Hmm.
women or something like that because their population's gonna need some help in about 20 years.
Yeah, well, a major problem in China is that one, there's so few women, largely because of selective abortions, and two,
Mm-hmm.
those that are driven just like in the West to be professionals and highly educated.
Yep.
But then you're up against the problem of women naturally want to marry up. They want to marry a spouse who can provide provisioning for them and status. And they're just, when you're a PhD making six figures, I mean, your options are already
PhD,
limited.
making six figures. Choose one.
Yeah, and thus you end up with a massive male population who just can never get married.
Yeah.
And that's historically a recipe for disaster.
Oh yeah. I have to deal with some men in my work who are in as well as in my gym who just are angry, and I can tell that they're angry. Like the women can tell that they're angry, and it's like, I have to sometime talk to this guy and tell him just to settle his ass down. But I've been angry, so I know what it's like. But it's like if you can't accept it and work towards it, like this guy's doing in your story, you have to just kind of take yourself out of the equation, get a nice cabin in the woods, and I don't know, marry a bear or
Train
something.
mercilessly there
Train
to.
mercilessly
Oh,
there.
wait. No, that's the Arthur approach.
Right. He's like he had more to get married for some awful reason, and it's like, why? Well, we were both the right sociopath to each other, and it's like, what are you doing? I'm emotionally abusing the child, honey, so that he becomes just like us. Oh, good job. Uh,
Uh, well, interesting you bring that up because there is something that could, in general outlines, be construed as a love triangle involving Arthur Morley and someone else in book 3.
no,
Yeah,
no, I don't like
it's
it.
horrifying. That's the right response.
I don't like either of those two characters breeding. I don't even like the idea of it. Uh, it's not even that, fan art or Rule 34 dojins or whatever. It's just like it's just a solid no. Whatever kid comes out of that's going to be a monster.
Oh, if you
Um,
don't like those two breeding, the third one should just
please,
turn
oh, it's
you
going to be
white.
Megami. Isn't it? It's just going to be Megami.
That would
Uh,
be telling.
yeah. But it's no. Honestly, romance has been like the one thing I haven't really improved on at all as a writer. So it's like just reading, listening to this sort of thing. It's like, okay, all right. I just got to let myself be open to all the terrible choices that could come on. And you know what? If the kid that comes out of it is Grothgar World Ender, that
Hmm.
that's that's just how it's gonna have to be. Can't
Well,
fight fate.
I hear you. And I mean, so far, it's not like there's been an overabundance of romance in Combat Frame XSeed.
No.
I don't know my audience, but I mean, the best we've had so far is Zane Dellister hijacking Dorothy Wheeler's van and
Mm-hmm.
generally being aloof and when he's not abusive to her, dragging her around the world, having her pull bullets out of him and sew him up,
Yeah.
uh, constantly abandon her for his Frankenstein machine.
Yep.
But they ended up together.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
It's like there's this one American dad joke that's actually hilarious. Like it's genuinely funny every time I watch it. Where it's like the whole family's at a wedding. It's the cold open, and it's like, yeah, Doctor Calgary is finally getting married, and they're like, what kind of woman, could love a man like Doctor Calgary, who's like the creepy
Mm.
mad scientist who handles all their medical issues. He made his son, sort of thing. Well, he made his wife too, and it's like a Lady
Mm.
Frankenstein situation, and everyone like starts screaming and freaking out,
Huh.
except for Klaus, who's Calgary's best friend, and he's like, oh, so wonderful, and so on and so forth. It's quite amusing. Um, though I'm sure that we're at the point where Blade Runner is going to start looking um, real good in a few years. Um,
I
with the
also give, speaking of which, I also give Red a love interest.
really, I'm
Yes.
all for that actually. As weird as it is to say, because Red is an
Mm.
actual like reasonable character who, even though he does have his arrogance and stuff like that, actually has character development over it and isn't a psychopath or sociopath or path of any kind. Really.
Yeah, he's going sane in a mad world. I suppose you could say.
Oh, good.
I don't know.
Now the question is whether Faust is going insane. I'd say no. I'd
Hmm.
say this is just him as he sort of wants to be,
Yeah,
globe trotting. Hmm?
Faust purposefully has what's called a flat arc.
Yeah.
Right.
He's
Everyone
the oldest one
else,
there, isn't he?
yeah, he's in his early to mid 30s, and then Red is the next oldest in his early 20s, and then the rest are teenagers.
Right. But then again, he I've never seen him as needing a character arc. Um, one of the things for writers, if anyone's listening to this, one of the things about it is whether or not a character needs it. Conan has like many character arcs, but overall his character never changes throughout all the different Conan stories, whether it's his old Conan or young Conan. He's still like powerful, lusty, violent Conan. Um,
Solomon Kane's an even better powered example.
ooh, you're absolutely
But
right.
yeah, but they both have flat arcs. It's not that
Yep,
they grow and change, but other characters change based on interactions with them.
absolutely. There's one where like Robert Howard actually said that has him in it as this young hunter who has a character arc going from this. He meets Conan, and he takes a mission for Conan to warn some settlement of the Pictus tribes, and he succeeds, but he also dies in the attempt, and Conan finds him later.
Hmm.
Um, which it's a good story, but it's like his character arc goes through a bunch of different stages, but then it comes back around to Conan, who is, such a pity that he has died, but that's how it is, I guess, in the wastes.
Yep. That's
Yep,
how the cookie crumbles.
yep, yep. Conan? Who the heck is Conan? Conan the Barbarian? I think he's a late night comedian. Yeah, you're right. That would be hilarious. You see Conan there, standing up there. He's got like a skull cup and whatever. He's like, first
Yeah.
on our, like he does a little bit of stand up that mostly involves like people screaming when getting gutted. And then,
Mm-hmm.
and then he
Mm-hmm.
goes on, have you ever noticed when pigs scream like this? Hee! But Aquilonians scream like this. Ah! The eyes just bust out laughing. Like it's the same level of comedy, I guess. Um, I hate late night shows, except for Eric
Yeah.
Andre show. That was actually very funny when I actually watched a couple episodes of it. Um, but only because it's so random and it has so many gags in it that some will work. Whereas listening to some dude who earns $1 million a year mumble rapping into an auto tuner,
Yeah.
um, is not quite so entertaining.
People who pray to the four winds mumble rap like this, but
Eh.
people worship Crom mumble rap like this. Mm,
And he's
I
like
got
me.
nothing.
Oh well, it's all right. Conan the Late Show Barbarian. Uh,
But yeah, we have a lot of hopping all over the place.
yeah.
I already set up the hints of relationship between Ivan and Maritza in
Hmm.
the second book.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I approve of that ship. Uh, Now
ah,
here's a ship that is kind of ugly but kind of works.
yeah.
Simon and Morley, but sadly they
Ha.
don't interact enough. What a shame. We need someone to get on that. We need our best Dojin writers. Our best men are working on it.
Well, that's a challenge because he
So,
he much prefers dealing with things, dealing with people, and she much prefers dealing with ideas,
yeah,
dealing with people and things. So you gotta it's gonna take a lot of doing to get either of them to
yeah.
interact with each other because they both issue interactions with people
Oh yeah.
unless forced.
It would be a lot of work for them both. Um, but that's all right. That's what shipping and fan fiction is for. I'm waiting for the point where Pulp Rev and Gundam for Us and so on, so forth, actually get fanfic writers. I'm waiting for Corey McCleary, who I don't know if you ever interact with him really.
Oh yeah,
Oh, good.
I know Corey.
Uh, but I'm waiting to for him to get really popular on Wattpad or something like that before I traumatize him with some erotic fan fiction. I won't even like have the names written in. I'll just write it up and then I'll copy paste the names when it's appropriate. Uh,
Well, delayed gratification is the best gratification.
oh, absolutely.
Whatever.
Uh, Who even knows what it is? I might even just change up the names just to mess with them a little more. Um, I torment him something terribly, but I love him so dearly. Uh, which
No, they
I
say indifference is the opposite of love.
yeah, exactly. Uh, with speaking of Ivan, how you we did need somebody who's Werebund Bavaria, who's connected with Todd Ritter, who I do hope someday you go back and have a novel about Werebund Bavaria back in the glory days when he crowned himself emperor or king or whatever it was. Um, which I when I read it, I was like, yeah, it was a fantastic choice to make from book one to book two. But will we ever
Thanks.
get a sort of a biblical history of Werebund Bavaria or of any kind or anything like that?
Well, that's largely up to my readers, because I assume you're referring to the CY2 guide and short story
Mm.
available only in the digital editions of the Combat Frame XSeed books. If you sign up for the Nova Frontier newsletter, you get a free copy of the Combat Frame XSeed CY2 guide and short story, which bridges books 1 and 2 and does tell the story of the rise of Wilhelm von Bodensee,
Outstanding.
the Kaiser of Neudeutschland. But one thing I did for the most recent campaign was for my second stretch goal this time, I tried something suggested by my readers, particularly DJ Schreffler, who designed the Kurfürst.
Mm-hmm.
And he asked for a short story like CY2 Gaiden, but that bridges the other half that's closer to CY40
Mm.
and ties up more of the loose ends from the first book. So I said, okay, we'll do a CY20 short story available only to the backers of the campaign. I'm not going to sell it anywhere else. So this is your only
Oh.
chance to get it. Yeah, but every backer gets it automatically.
Oh. I do like
And
that.
so yeah, we've met that. We passed that stretch goal. So I'm going to write a CY20 story, which is going to feature the final adventure of Zane Dellister.
I really like that, especially since Zane was a pretty great character. Um, and just all in all was worth watching for the entertaining stuff he did, marrying Dorothy Wheeler and all that good stuff. Though I think I had an asteroid dropped on me or something. I can't remember,
Huh.
but crash landed. But that's spoilers for CY40. Well, let's see here. I think that covers all the major characters. Honestly, with your stream yesterday, I kind of wanted to avoid the mechs a bit, which are oh so cool,
Mm.
so awesome. Just to talk about the characters, which do need love. You
Yeah.
I've been trying to read like a bunch of like quote unquote popular things that people have on Amazon, like Starship Blackbeard, which is pretty entertaining mostly until I just kind of wandered away. Uh, by the way, people are releasing like all 9 of their books in one Amazon copy for like 99 cents, and it bothers me because it means
Hmm.
that they're not buying all the other ones, and all the money they spent on covers is wasted. But
Hmm.
that's its own thing. Anyway, but it's like, you have the ships which are never quite described like the way you want them. You have the characters, you have this and that, but really it's the whole thing. It's not just the action scenes, it's the reason why you have action scenes, it's the people fighting the action scenes. Nick Cole and Jason Ansbach just hit that characterization out of the park. Star Wars hit it out of the park, Star Trek hit it out of the park in the beginning anyway. And I'm glad that you're also hitting it out of the park here. And I really do hope for more from these characters as time goes on. And I'll be waiting for CY40 Second Coming with a lot of anticipation.
Excellent. I tried to build that anticipation in my readers.
Oh, good.
You will not be disappointed. I'm pulling out all the stops on this one.
Fantastic. With this sort of, I want to say like half done or something like that. What's next on the horizon after this?
After this, we are concluding the CY40 arc with CY40 Second Coming.
Mm-hmm.
So the story arc that began in Collision Year 40. And then we're looking forward again. Anyone who has read my short story Anacyclosis from Sci Fi Journal
Mm-hmm.
and also from my own Strange Matter anthology will know that it ties into the Comet Frame XSeed universe. It takes place in the same universe in the CY70s, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the bridge story between CY40 Second Coming and Comet Frame XSeed S.
I
So
like it.
S is going to be the next novel, and it's going to start a new story arc.
I like it. I'm gonna have to actually go out and find my old copies of Sci-Fi Journal from way back in the day um, to read it and figure it out. Um, though that's probably something I'm gonna have to investigate on my own time. I am looking forward to see why 42nd coming, the new mechs, the new adventures, the possible love triangle, which will be cancerous as all get out, but incredibly entertaining to watch.
Oh
Wooly
my, yes.
Ram, yeah, Wooly Ram recommended we just do a visual novel, which I probably should of prominent Superversive and Pulp Rev characters in there. It's like, ooh, what's this? And it's like some space marine, and it turns out like 5 out of 8 of them are space marines of some kind, and it's like, or combat frame pilots or whatever. It's like, what's your emotional damage? Actually, I'm perfectly reasonable in every single way, and it's like you're talking to Tom, and it's like you gotta get the right thing out for Arthur to come out, and it's like that's the true romance, the secret characters, the bad ends you want. Uh, but
Hey guy, you're too uptight. Your mate will kill you. Relax. You take a pull off this. There you go.
right. Uh, I do enjoy the Tom scenes, if only for the whiplash that hits you every single time he comes on stage.
Oh,
Oh
thank
well.
you.
Well, it's been an hour. Do you have any final words for us?
Yes, go back the campaign. We just unlocked Series 3 trading cards, which feature many of our Build-A-Mech designs
Mm-hmm.
by creators like DJ Schruffler, Emprev, who's in the chat, and one by my awesome cover artist, Todd Everhart, one by Logic Monkey on Twitter, and one by Art Anon, also in the chat.
Yep, yep.
So this time we've got a cornucopia of Mech Visions by different talented artists.
Mm-hmm.
You can get those alone, although every perk tier comes bundled with all 3 ebooks. But then there's also a mega bundle which comes with the Series 3 trading cards, all 3 ebooks, and the CY42nd coming paperback. We've been talking about the characters. You still have a chance to be a character. There's still one left. So
Oh.
you can make your mark and become a part of the Xseed canon. So go support that Indiegogo. The link is below. And as always, we appreciate your support.
Yep, and thank you all for listening in as you always do and supporting creators like Brian Niemeier and others who I feature on this channel. As this channel grows, we will certainly, keep finding new and interesting people to bring in. Next week, I'm bringing in the ever effervescent Jaji Lamplighter Wright with her writing. Indiegogo, with writing classes Indiegogo designed with authors in mind. And probably far more sanity inducing than trying to read my Necronomicon Aesthetica, which was also written with authors in mind, but I'm told is uh, tasteful in the sense that they can taste it, and not in
Hmm.
the sense that it fits on the shelf.
Well, if
Um,
I can give a brief plug for that, Jadjo is my editor on the Soul Cycle. She's the reason I'm as good an author as I am. I highly recommend any chance to take her writing advice and just do everything she tells you.
Oh, absolutely. The art and craft of writing, I will put it in the chat.
Very good.
Um, because I am that sort of guy. There we go. And I was one of the prototypers for this. I really did appreciate it. And I backed it for the $10 one because I do want that ebook version. Because I find that I do better in self study than I do with classes or anything like that. But that's
Same here.
just me.
Yeah.
Um, we that was where Urubu started, was with Saya no Uta. Does anyone remember Aldanoa Zero? I don't, except for the Sawatawi drop. Um, he wrote like the first episode of that. Anyway, I could read the chat forever. Um, remember, guys, make that visual novel happen, and everyone can go away unhurt. As always, thank you for joining me today, Brian.
Thank you for having me, and thanks to everyone for listening.
Absolutely. Good night.